The smell of wood shavings and sulfur had always reminded Ethan of home. The 27-year-old worked at the Sterling Matchstick Factory in Chicago, being the youngest employee at the firm, manufacturing thousands of matches every month. The factory was old with red brick walls and noisy machines, but Ethan loved the place. After years of tedious work, the sight of a completed box full of matchsticks was always rewarding to him, as he got to put a smile on some of the residents' faces who bought his products from the company. However, recent happenings in the factory had become the stuff of nightmares for Ethan. "I'm telling you, Abe, the factory is all I have," he whined, wiping the sweat from his forehead as the grizzled old man worked at the dipping machine. Abe gave him a knowing look as he worked his gnarled hands at the machine. "Son, I've been here for 40 years, and this factory has seen better times than this. Trust me, things will change." Ethan had been in denial for the entire week after hearing the news that the factory had gone into debt since he started working there. The factory had changed hands as the owner had passed away, and the new buyer was allegedly a billionaire who wanted to turn the matchstick-making facility into a biofuel plant. Ethan wanted to quit and move back to his hometown, but the thought of returning to his sister's disapproving and judgmental gaze made him reconsider. The rumors were hushed on Friday as a black Rolls-Royce pulled outside the factory. The workers murmured amongst themselves as who the visitor could be. The tall and elegant woman who stepped out the car was dressed in a designer's black suit, worth more than Ethan's monthly salary, and complimented with gold necklaces and a diamond ring. Her red-bottomed shoes clicked as she strode purposefully towards the factory doors, and Ethan was speechless as he watched the young and beautiful businesswoman walk up to his workbench with a disdainful look on her face. "Are these matchsticks?" Victoria asked, picking up a bundle of sticks from the production line as her entourage of lawyers and assistants entered the factory. "They are in excellent condition, every box of 20,000 matches," Ethan replied, trying to sound confident. "The quality is exceptional, and we have an excellent brand reputation in the market." "Excellent quality." The CEO gave a short, humorless laugh before crushing the sticks in her hand, before tossing the broken sticks on the floor. "This is pathetic. This is all trash." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he looked up at the woman in disbelief. "Ma'am, those are my works. I've been making matches for 5 years, and my grandfather was also in the match business. This is our legacy." "A legacy?" Victoria raised an eyebrow, looking down at him. "The factory will be converted to a biofuel plant, and this is pathetic. This factory does not need matchstick sellers. It needs people to fuel the country's energy needs." The workers looked on in stunned silence. Ethan's hands writhed as he looked at the CEO. "So, you mean to say that all of us will be fired?" Victoria gave a slow smile as she looked at the man before her. "You think that you matter? You are nothing but trash. I could throw this entire building into the air with the money in my purse." The condescending woman moved closer and grabbed Ethan's shirt collar to his face. "This is pathetic, little man. You think your little fire is significant. It is not," she said, her voice low and venomous. "Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied. She pushed him away roughly, and the other workers came to help Ethan as he steadied himself on his feet. Victoria turned around and faced the group. "This factory belongs to me from now on. You will all be terminated, and anyone who dares protest will be escorted out by security. Do you understand?" The workers were stunned, but did not dare say a word as Victoria walked away, clicking her heels as she went. Nobody respects this place," Abe said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder as he watched the CEO walk away. "I will show her who is pathetic," Ethan muttered to himself as he stared daggers at the woman's retreating figure. He was up before dawn the following day, unable to sleep thinking about Victoria's condescending behavior. The woman had insulted his work and the legacy of a generations-old family business. He was more annoyed than ever at the CEO's arrogant attitude. As he walked into the factory the next day, a wave of sadness washed over him as he saw the other workers walking into the factory gates. All of them wore the same blue shirts with the company logo on the breast, with disheartened expressions on their faces. They all knew the bad news, and Ethan turned as he sensed someone approaching. He turned to see Victoria walking towards him in a crimson dress worth millions. Her heels were also red, and her neck sparkled with diamonds as she walked. Her face was perfect with not a wrinkle, as she announced her presence to those around her in her usual condescending manner. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said, her heels clicking as she made her way to the center of the factory. "I am the new owner of this factory, and today will be your last day here. As of today, you will all be fired. Security will escort you out one by one." Ethan looked up as Victoria walked towards him. "Before you fire me, I need to ask you a question regarding some fires which occurred 40 years ago at the Crawford factory." Excuse me." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she stared at him, confusion crossing her face. "What is that supposed to mean?" The other workers gasped as they looked at Ethan with concerned expressions on their faces. "I heard that your father set fire to the Crawford factory, and I need to ask you a few questions about that fire," Ethan replied, looking up at Victoria. "What did you say?" Victoria asked again, this time with an expression of disbelief. Ethan looked up as the factory fell silent. "I said your father burned down the Crawford factory, and I heard about evidence implicating him in the crime." "You what?" Victoria's face turned red as she stomped towards Ethan. "How dare you say that about my father?" "Victoria!" one of the lawyers shouted as they ran towards the young woman. "Ethan, leave this to us." "I think not," Victoria said as she turned to face Ethan. "Do you know why you are here?" Ethan looked up, her eyes burning. "I am here to tell you that your father set fire to the Crawford factory 40 years ago, and I have the evidence proving his involvement." "Who dares talk about my father like that?" Victoria screamed, her face contorted with rage as she stormed towards Ethan. She grabbed his collar, raising her voice. "Do you know who you are talking to, little man?" She gave him a contemptuous look before continuing. "My father is dead and I am rich. You are nothing but a pathetic little matchstick maker, with no business talking about my father's past. Your father is dead and I am rich. You are nothing but a pathetic little matchstick maker, with no business talking about my father's past." Ethan stood as she grabbed the front part of his shirt in her hands. "I am sorry, Victoria, but I have evidence implicating your father in the fire, and I need to ask you a few questions about his activities at the time of the fire." "Who dares talk about my father like that?" Victoria screamed, her face contorted with rage as she stormed towards Ethan. She looked surprised as Victoria's hands gripped Ethan's shirt. "Are you mad, man?" "This is crazy," one of the lawyers said, looking at Ethan. "You want to talk about evidence?" Victoria screamed, looking at Ethan. "Fine. You want to talk about evidence?" Her arms shook as she pointed at him. "You think you have something on my family?" The woman's eyes were wild with rage as she continued speaking. "I am Victoria Sterling. I own this city and I own this state, and you are nothing but a pathetic little matchstick maker who will never, ever touch my father again." As she was silent for a moment, her face inches away from Ethan's. Then she grabbed his shirt by the front and ripped it open downwards. The fabric in her hands separated as she tore it, revealing Ethan's chest. "The lady doth protest too much," one of the security guards said as he watched in shock. Ethan stood frozen as hands tore his shirt, and his face reddened with embarrassment. All the workers looked on in shock as Victoria's hands tore the shirt downwards until it was fully off. "There," Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Now everybody can see what you are. Nothing. Just a man in rags who will never touch my name again." She threw the discarded cloth at Ethan's feet in disgust. "A security. Get him out of my factory and burn every file there is in this factory. I do not want any evidence about my father's past in this place." The guards obeyed as they grabbed Ethan by the arms and dragged him out of the building. As they walked, Ethan looked at Victoria's retreating figure. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said quietly. "Biggest mistake of my life." Victoria laughed as she watched the security guards lead Ethan away. "You mean this?" She kicked the discarded piece of fabric before looking at Ethan. "What are you going to do about it, little matchstick maker?" "Cry." Ethan looked down at the torn piece of clothing, and suddenly an idea came to him. He would ensure that she would regret what she had done. "Did you know that your father's men used matchsticks to set the Crawford factory on fire?" Ethan asked as he looked at the woman. "I know about that," Victoria said. "Do you know which kind of matchsticks they used?" Ethan asked. "One of my assistants found a box of matchsticks which had special chemicals on them, indicating that it was used to start fires." Victoria replied. "Do you know what the special chemicals on the matchsticks are?" Ethan asked. "I am not interested in that," Victoria replied. "What I am about to say is very important to me." Ethan looked at the woman before turning his gaze to the floor. "Those chemicals on the matchsticks are what they used to set fire to the Crawford factory, and I have several pieces of evidence which incriminate your father in that case." "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Ethan said as he looked at Victoria's face. "Did you know that your father's men used matchsticks to set the Crawford factory on fire?" Ethan asked. "I know about that," Victoria replied. "Do you know which kind of matchsticks they used?" Ethan asked. "One of my assistants found a box of matchsticks which had special chemicals on them, indicating that it was used to start fires." Victoria replied. "Do you know what the special chemicals on the matchsticks are?" Ethan asked. "I am not interested in that," Victoria replied. "If you knew what the chemicals on those matchsticks were, you would be appalled at what your father did all those years ago," Ethan said. Looking at Victoria's expression, he continued, "Do you know why I am telling you all this?" "I think not," Victoria said. "I am telling you because those chemicals on the matchsticks are what your father's men used to set fire to the Crawford factory," Ethan replied. "They are also the same chemicals your men used to set fire to this factory 3 days ago when they attacked me. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Ethan walked out onto the street, his co-workers watching as the guards escorted him away. As he walked the street, he reached into his pocket and removed a small wooden box with some matchsticks. The chemicals on them were identical to those on the matchsticks, which had been used to set fire to the Crawford factory, and this one. He would ensure that the money she took for her father would be returned with interest. "Burn every file there is in this factory," Ethan said as he looked at the workers. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." 3 days later, Ethan was still holed up in his apartment staring at the shredded piece of clothing that was once his favorite shirt. Victoria had taken everything from him in the last 3 days, but she would soon learn the cost of her actions. Ethan looked at the old factory records on the table as he listened to the soft tapping of the rain on the window pane. Margaret Chen, the factory's accountant, had risked her life to provide these records to him before she was arrested by Victoria's guards. The documents showed every purchase the factory had made since its opening in 1986. This included all the materials used to make the matchsticks with special chemicals on them that could be used to set fires. "This is all we have," Margaret said as she looked at him. "These are all the records we have on the 1986 batch of matchsticks, the ones with the special chemicals on them that can be used to set fires." She paused before continuing. "Ethan, if Victoria finds out that we have these records, she will kill us." "Don't worry, I will ensure that she never finds out," Ethan replied. Margaret looked at him surprised. "How are you going to ensure that?" "I will ensure that by making sure that she never finds out because she will be too busy paying for the damage she has caused," Ethan said. Margaret smiled at him. "I hope you are right about that." It was the third night in Ethan's apartment that he studied the records. He knew he had enough information to take Victoria down, but he needed more proof of his accusations. Ethan looked at the old record with the chemical components of the matchstick before he placed it on the table. The document showed that the chemicals on the special matchsticks were used in setting fires to buildings. "Mr. Parker, I have reviewed the evidence you have submitted, and it is all compelling," Detective Miller said. He looked at Ethan. "I have one question for you, however. Are you doing this for revenge?" "Anything," Ethan replied, looking at the detective. "I'm doing this for revenge, and I hope you enjoy seeing her get what she deserves." The detective looked at Ethan. "You see, Mr. Parker, I believe that it is important that you are fair in your accusations and give her a chance to explain herself in court." "I'm sorry, detective, but I am not interested in being fair," Ethan replied. "She has taken everything from me and my co-workers, and I want her to know what it feels like to lose everything." "Are you sure about that?" Miller asked. "Yes, I'm sure about that," Ethan replied. "There is one problem," the detective said. "Since you have submitted the evidence that implicates her father in the fire, I am afraid that you will have to testify at the restitution hearing." "That will be fine," Ethan said. "Are you aware that her father is dead, and that she will be the one who has to pay for the damage he has caused?" "Yes, I am aware of that, and so are her lawyers," Ethan said. "Do you think that this will be enough to convict him and hold her accountable for his actions?" "It will be enough to convict him, and once she finds out that he is dead, she will have to pay for the damage he has caused." "This will not do," Miller said. "I believe that you should hold off on presenting this evidence until the restitution hearing. The restitution hearing is next week, and I want to ensure that she knows how much damage her father has caused." Miller gave Ethan a strange look. "Are you doing this for revenge, Mr. Parker?" Miller asked. "If I am, then so be it," Ethan replied. "Okay, Ethan. I will issue a warrant for your father's conviction, and we will freeze his assets until the restitution hearing." "Thank you, detective. I appreciate that," Ethan said as he hung up the phone from the cold case division. The next morning, Victoria woke up to the news that her father had been convicted in a federal court. The news channels were all talking about it, and her stock prices were plummeting by the second. Her lawyers and accountants were all arguing about what to do next as her company's value continued to decrease. Victoria was furious, especially after learning that Ethan had testified against her in his father's hearing in court. All of it would have been fine if it were not for the next development. At 10 in the morning, 2 federal marshals arrived at her penthouse with a court order. Victoria looked surprised as they informed her that her assets had been frozen. "This is ridiculous," she said, storming towards the guards. "I am Victoria Sterling, and you cannot just come here and freeze my assets." "Actually, Ms. Sterling, I am Ethan Parker, and I came to inform you that your assets have been frozen as per the court's order," one of the marshals replied. "What did you say?" Victoria asked, looking at the man. "I said that your assets have been frozen as per the court's order," Ethan said, looking at Victoria with a smirk on his face. "What did you say?" Victoria asked again, looking puzzled. "I said that your assets have been frozen as per the court's order," Ethan replied. "This is ridiculous," Victoria said, storming towards the guards. "I am Victoria Sterling, and you cannot just come here and freeze my assets." "What did you say?" Victoria asked again, looking puzzled. "I said that your assets have been frozen as per the court's order," Ethan said, looking at Victoria with a smirk on his face. "This is ridiculous," Victoria said, storming towards the guards. "I am Victoria Sterling, and you cannot just come here and freeze my assets." "Actually, Ms. Sterling, I am Ethan Parker, and I came to inform you that your assets have been frozen as per the court's order," one of the marshals replied. "What did you say?" Victoria asked again, looking puzzled. "I said that your assets have been frozen as per the court's order," Ethan said, looking at Victoria with a smirk on his face. The courtroom was filled with reporters as they waited for the hearing to commence. Ethan looked at his new blue shirt, which he wore as he got up from the bench. The former factory workers filed through the gate in awe at the sight of the courtroom. They were joined by journalists snapping photos as Victoria entered in a gray suit and made her way to the other side of the courtroom. "Your Honor," Miller said, standing before the judge, "the evidence against Harrison Crawford is overwhelming, and the eyewitnesses have testified to his involvement in the fire. Well, the evidence against Ms. Sterling was also overwhelming," the judge replied, looking sternly at Victoria. "Ms. Sterling, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Victoria looked surprised before her face turned pale. "Your Honor, I did not know about my father's involvement in the fire, and I have evidence which proves that Ethan Parker is lying about his accusations against my father." "Your Honor, Ms. Sterling is lying, and this is all a ploy to get me fired," Ethan replied. "She is lying about the entire thing," Miller said. "Ms. Sterling knew about her father's involvement in the fire, and she assaulted Mr. Parker in front of everyone after learning of his accusations." Victoria's hands shook as she looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I will lose everything if this is true." "That is the point, Ms. Sterling," Miller said, turning to face Ethan. "The evidence against your father is overwhelming, and he will be held accountable for his actions. All of this happened because of you," Ethan said, looking at Victoria with a mixture of anger and frustration. "You set this all in motion when you assaulted me and tore my clothes in front of everyone. You thought that by humiliating me in such a public manner, that it would stop me from airing your dirty laundry. You were wrong." Looking at the torn shirt in his hand, Ethan continued, "You think that your money, power, and influence make you superior to me, but it does not. It never has. The judge looked at Ethan. This court is adjourned. Harrison Crawford is posthumously convicted of arson and the murder of the Crawford factory workers. The Sterling estate is ordered to pay $250 million in restitution to the victims' families. Victoria Sterling is ordered to pay $50 million in damages to the employees of the Sterling matchstick factory. EMS. Sterling's assets are frozen pending the restitution hearing. The courtroom erupted as workers cheered and journalists hurried to file their reports. Victoria staggered back in shock as her carefully orchestrated empire began to crumble. Ethan walked past Victoria as the judge gave his ruling. He turned to face her just before he left. "You said my fire was pathetic," he said quietly. "You said I was nothing, that I was a nobody. You took my dignity, and you tore my clothes in front of everyone. I am not a nobody, and I will show you just how far my fire can reach." Victoria's mouth twitched in rage as she looked at Ethan. "What do you want?" "Nothing," he replied with a smile. "I have everything I need. My dignity, and the knowledge that you are a manipulative gold digger who thought she could buy her way out of this." Looking down at the torn shirt in his hand, Ethan continued, "From now on, every time I see this, I will remember exactly what you are. A billionaire who thought she was untouchable, until a matchstick maker lit the flame." Ethan turned and walked out into the sunshine as his fellow workers rushed to greet him. Abe was the first to reach him with a beaming face. "You did it, son." "No, we did it," Ethan replied, turning to look at the other workers. "All of us. The little people who keep the world spinning." The factory was not dead, and with the money from the restitution, the old building would soon be restored to its former glory. With everyone's combined efforts, they bought back the factory and reopened the next day. The matchstick making would continue, and the residents of Chicago would be able to buy their everyday matches. The fires that had been lit across the county would put smiles on everyone's faces. With his dignity restored, Ethan was free to move on with his life as the new owner of the factory. After all, the little matchstick maker had lit the fire that would consume the billionaire's empire. The end.